Hello everyone, my name is Sathya, and in this session we will take a look at a very important soft skill which needs to be developed by not just students but everyone, and that is time management. In this fast moving world, it is extremely difficult for a person to find adequate time to manage all the various activities that he or she must be doing. And hence, it becomes extremely essential to understand how does one manage the limited amount of time that one has at his or her own disposal. To realize the importance of 1 year, ask a student who has failed a class. To realize the importance of 1 month, ask the mother of a premature baby. To realize the importance of 1 week, ask the editor of a weekly newspaper. To realize the importance of an hour, ask two lovers who are waiting to meet. To realize the importance of 1 minute, ask someone who has just missed the train. To realize the importance of 1 second, ask someone who has just missed an accident. And to realize the importance of a millisecond, ask someone who got the silver medal, who came in the second place in the Olympics. Now, this is an old post, and I'm sure you must have got this in various emails and forwards and as posts on Facebook. But what this does tell us is that it's not just the months and years, but even seconds which have a precious role to play in our life. So what exactly is time management all about? Well, time management has 5 main aspects. You talk about planning and goal setting. You talk about managing yourself. Then you talk about dealing with other people. Well, all this is about your time. And finally, in the end, it's always about getting results. So the first 4, planning, goal setting, managing oneself, dealing with others, and the time, they all interconnect and interact to ultimately generate the 5th, and that is the result. Because truly speaking, results matter, don't they? So remember that time is a commodity. It is not something which you can manufacture, but it is something which is limited and you have to make the best use of. Time is the most precious thing we have, and whether you talk about raw materials or capital or all the other things of production, ultimately it is time which works out to be the most valuable resource. So time and how we spend it within an organization or during our own times of studies, it must be managed effectively. Now remember, you cannot store time and keep it for later use, right? It is totally perishable, which means if you have got an extra hour today, you cannot save it up to spend on a day when you require an extra hour. Time once gone can never be brought back, and we can never ever hope to store time to be used at our convenience. So there are many essential habits which a person who yearns to manage his own time must cultivate. These include various little things like knowing where the hours are going. Many times we feel that we have no idea on or what we have spent our time. So it is essential to know where the hours are being spent. Always keep focused on the end result and work to a defined priority. If you do not set a goal and a specific time for that goal, then you have absolutely no idea on how to prioritize your schedule. So it is extremely important to also schedule time for important issues. In fact, one must always learn how to delegate routine tasks and responsibilities for them. Many people suffer from indecision. They cannot take a quick decision on time. So in case you are a person like that, you must learn to confront your own indecision and delay. Stress is a major factor which helps kill the precious time that we have. So take the stress out of work. And most importantly, keep applying these essential habits. Because once you know how to do these things on an unconscious level, you will automatically find that a lot of time is being saved by you. So remember that time can be categorized into 2 types. One is something called fast time. When you're absorbed in it or when you're enjoying an activity, you do not realize when time flies. And on the other hand, there's something called slow time. So when you're bored with an activity or you're having a bad time or when you're scared, time simply does not move on. In fact, Einstein once famously explained his theory of relativity using a similar example. He says time is relative. When you're meeting a beautiful girl, an hour seems like a minute, but when you're sitting on a hot plate, a minute seems like an hour. So remember, the most common mistake that many people do when they try to manage their time is by over or underestimating time. Now remember, the time that you think that you require for a task or an activity could potentially be over or underestimated because of the following reasons. You might have a wrong perception about the intensity of that activity, or the level of brain function is not in your control, and hence you're not able to perform that particular task with your complete attention and devotion. Sometimes we misestimate the length of gap between enjoyments, and if we are in the throes of emotions like fear or ecstasy, then also time tends to lose its importance, or rather we tend to lose the sense of time during such times. So what happens when we estimate time incorrectly? If you've underestimated the time, then you are stressed out because you have committed to maybe too many tasks. And because you are running short, the quality of the output that you would desire is not to par, and it is often very poor. In fact, many deadlines may be missed because you have not estimated adequate amount of time. But on the other hand, if you overestimate the time required, then because you seem to have a lot of time on your hands, there may be stress due to people pressing you to have the activities completed. You might seem to be wasting time, and people might give you stress for that. Again, poor quality output is absolutely a factor here, and the deadlines that you have set may not actually match the requirements, and you might end up wasting a lot of time which may have been used productively elsewhere. So let us understand a few time and tested time management principles which will help us ideally prepare a good timetable for us. Remember, we can always categorize all the various activities and the time spent on them in this particular matrix. This matrix is divided based on how urgent or non-urgent a particular activity is and how important or unimportant a particular activity is. So those activities which are both urgent and important fall in the first quadrant, and here we call them things like crisis or deadlines. On the other hand, we might have activities which are not urgent but which are extremely important. These things include things like prevention, relationship building, planning, and even recreation, because although not urgent, recreation is absolutely essential for your life. Quadrant 3 would be things which are urgent in nature but which practically speaking are not that important. Could be things like interruptions, some meetings which might not be important but may seem to be urgent, or a lot of popular activities. Finally, we have things which are neither urgent nor important but which are basically time wasters. So these might be a lot of pleasant activities which we would like to do. However, they are neither urgent nor important for us. So what do we do with our knowledge of these 4 quadrants? Remember, when you're in the first quadrant, and remember the first quadrant was all about being urgent and important. So when you're in the first quadrant, all the activities seem to be very important which have to be completed now, and this brings about stress, burnout. In fact, you have to learn crisis management, and you seem to be firefighting all the time. In fact, it impels you to focus on the immediate and does not leave you with adequate time for planning for the future. So quadrant 1 is important but a very bad quadrant to be in. The third quadrant, and if I go back to this, the third quadrant are those activities which seem urgent but technically which are not very important. So the third quadrant items create a lot of short-term focus. Again, there's a lot of crisis management because the work seems urgent and we fail to realize that it is actually not important. In fact, if you are always behind activities in third quadrant, it shows that you have a low value on your goals. You feel it is your responsibility to complete that urgent task without realizing that it is not important. So you get a feeling of victimization and a lack of control over your own activities. In fact, quadrant 3 activities tend to have a lot of shallow relationships in your life. Now, quadrants 3 and 4, which are activities which are not very important but which fluctuate between urgent and not urgent. So if you happen to keep jumping between quadrants 3 and 4, that is focusing only on the non-important activities, it shows that you are totally irresponsible. In fact, there is a high dependency on others for even taking care of the basics. And remember, if you are a person who always juggles between activities of quadrant 3 and 4, it will ensure a very short career path for you in your organization. For students, this indicates that you are not focusing on what are the actual goals and you're indulging in a lot of activities which are totally useless. Now, quadrant 2, works which are absolutely important but which you have created as not being very urgent. So being in quadrant 2, having a lot of your activities situated in such a position shows that you have vision, you have perspective. In fact, you are a very balanced and disciplined person and that you have adequate control over whatever you keep doing. So remember, there are 6 basic criteria which allow any person to function with all the activities in quadrant 2. These include clarity of thought. You must be very clear. And you must have a balance. You must know what is to be done, what is not to be done, what can be done first and what can be prioritized for a later time. This shows that you have adequate focus on what is your ultimate goal. It shows what is actually important for you and of top priority. In fact, you need to have the ability to get on with people and enough flexibility so that you can manage to put all your important activities on a non-urgent basis. And you need to be a portable person. That is, you need to have the ability to shift from one point to another. So ultimately, flexibility helps you become a person who is able to manage all his or her activities in quadrant 2. So the basic requirements to reach quadrant 2 are a clear definition of the organizational roles and specifically your own role. For students, this involves a clear definition of what the required end goal is and how you are going to go about achieving that particular goal. As a student, you might have the goal, I wish to get into the top law institute of this country, or I need to clear my entrance examination in the top 100 ranks and get into the university of my choice. This requires selection of and focus on SMART goals. Now, SMART is an acronym which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time set. You need to have the development and utilization of schedules. And finally, you must have the practice of daily adapting in the work role. Even as students, you must know how to adapt yourself to the ever-changing external world. So, to stay within quadrant 2, you must have the ability to say no, and to say no in a professional manner. Many a time students would be distracted by activities which might seem relevant at that point of time, but ultimately which does not do much to help them with their goal. For example, when you're studying, you might have a friend come over and tempt you with the invitation to go and watch a movie. Or you might be distracted by spending hours on the net, including websites like Facebook and Twitter. But are these activities actually ending to your ultimate goal of being successful in your life? If no, you must have the ability to say no to your friend or to say no to yourself, to deny yourself the momentary pleasure of
hanging out on social media websites. So remember, if you are having a lot of activities which are associated with quadrant 3 or quadrant 4, which is either urgent or not urgent, but definitely not important, then indulging in such activities is not going to deliver you competitive advantage. So remember the fundamentals. The focus is always on time and the resources which you have available to you. And here, time is also one of the most precious resources that you have. It is extremely important for you to have a pre-analysis of your performance. What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And how do I determine that the way I'm performing this activity is at least at par with the expected level of performance? You need to have a clear analysis of your goals and your objectives. And you need to be very, very systematic in the processes that you follow to ultimately achieve your goal. If you're a student, what kind of a systematic process can you have? It could be as simple as creating a timetable, starting from that moment you wake up in the morning, perform your daily ablutions, take care of your school time and the time for additional classes or something, sparing time for homework, a little bit of time for entertainment as well, and so on. If you can make a timetable with a judicious allocation of time to all sorts of activities, including entertainment, then you have created a systematic process for yourself. So remember, there are three things which always determine the ultimate result. So you need to focus on the quality, resource and time with the one thing in mind, that it is not possible to achieve everything together. If you wish to have time and resource in a short span, you might have to compromise on quality. If quality and time are of prime importance, then you might not be able to control the amount of resources required. And if you want to have a quality work done with the amount of resources that you have, then time may not be available to you in the quantity that you wish. So remember, the quality of an outcome is directly influenced by the resources that you have and the time constraints involved. Now remember, when I talked about goal, I talked about the acronym SMART. So what exactly is a SMART goal? Well, S stands for specific and well-defined objective. It is not enough to say, I wish to get into a good institute. What do you mean by a good institute? So you could have a specific and well-defined objective. I wish to appear for the entrance examination in 2014 and get into the XYZ university. M stands for measurable. If you say, I wish to become a rich person in life, how much money exactly defines that you are rich? For a person like you, you might not consider 5 lakh rupees a month as being rich. And for a poor person like me, I would be considering myself rich if I earn 5,000 rupees a month. Just for an example. So be very specific. I wish to clear the entrance examination. Fine. But how do you measure that you have achieved this? A stands for achievable in terms of resources available and expectations. You must have very realistic expectations. Let us assume that you have taken commerce as your subject after standard 10th. Now, do you think it is achievable to have a goal like, I will clear the entrance examination for engineering once I complete 11th and 12th commerce? No. So based on the amount of resources that you have, you must decide whether this goal is actually achievable or not. Because remember, if you are trying to set a goal which you know a priori that is unachievable, then you're only setting yourself for a lot of disappointment and heartburn. R stands for relevant to the overall business strategy. Let us say your ultimate strategy as a student is to clear the entrance examination for XYZ institute or XYZ course in the year 2014. Now, if you say, one of my goals for this objective is to finish reading 2 comic books per week. Now, do you think reading 2 comic books per week is going to be relevant to your goal of entering into a good institution of education? Maybe not. So whatever goals you set must be relevant to the ultimate goal that you wish to attain. And finally, T means time bound. I'll clear the entrance examination. Good. But by what time? In the next 5 or 10 years. Do you think it makes sense? Or you say, I will earn 1 lakh rupees. Excellent. In the next 20 years or so. In the next 20 years, if you have a goal of earning just 1 lakh rupees, you might just go out on the streets with a begging bowl and you can still achieve that. So it does not make sense to have goals if you have not bound them with a specific deadline. So remember, your goals and objectives must be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and most importantly, time bound. Now, you need to look at certain realities. Is the allotted time for completion of plans realistic for you? In the effort to achieve results, are you making efficient use of the available time? If more than one person is involved in doing the activity, then how can the time available be used to generate the optimal results? Or is task-related time management appropriate and realistic in the situation? These are certain realistic questions which you need to ask yourself before you start managing your time. Because remember, time management is not just an academic activity. It is something very practical which you will be doing almost on a daily basis throughout your life. So remember, time management ultimately talks about productive work. So what exactly do we mean by that? Well, sometimes work seems to be busy and sometimes the work is productive. We talk about indecision and delays, we talk about overwork, we talk about urgency versus importance, and we talk about prioritization here. So remember, just because you are busy does not mean that you are productive. You might be writing down notes all day long, but if it's just blind copying of words and you're not understanding the meaning of what is being written, then although you are busy, you're not productive. Sitting with the textbook for 5 hours without actually gaining any knowledge out of it is simply busy work and not productive. So you need to understand there's something called being effective, which is doing the right things, and efficiency, which is doing the right things correctly. So some problems with busy and productive work is procrastination. Kal kar lenge, I'll do it tomorrow. Why should I worry about things? I've got enough time. The examinations are scheduled for the month of May. It's only January. I've got more than 4 months. Remember, today you might have just 4 months left. 4 months down the line, it is the D-Day. Putting off doing the things that you should be doing at this point is one of the major reasons why you run out of time. So what is the solution to this? You list all the tasks that you are currently putting off. You remove 2 from the list by doing them right now. Then plan and set a schedule for dealing with the rest of the tasks on the list. Also, reward yourself when these tasks are completed. Alternatively, you must punish yourself when the tasks are not completed on schedule. Because human behavior is such that we tend to repeat the activities that we have been rewarded for, and we tend to avoid those activities for which we have been punished. So, when you are faced with a task, you can decide to have 5 actions. Either you do it, or you delegate it, give it to someone else, or you dump it, that is, you completely avoid doing the activity, or you deadline it. You decide to do it at a later date, but set a time limit for it, or you dissect it. Maybe not the entire job together, but do it in small parts. But ultimately, you have to take one of these decisions. The second problem is paralyzing perfectionism. There is a huge failure in people to recognize the difference between excellence and perfection. Excellence is doing the work mostly right. It is achievable, healthy, satisfying, and realistic. But if you try to do something with perfection, then it could be unattainable, frustrating, or unrealistic. Trying to get a score of 100 out of 100 in mathematics might be perfection, But is it realistic? On the other hand, if you are just a 50% scorer and you set a goal of, let us say, 80% for yourself in the paper, then that is excellence, right? So first try to achieve excellence. And if excellence is already there in the bag, it's then and then you decide whether you actually want to go in for perfection, or is excellence good enough for you. One of the other problems that people face is setting unchallenging objectives. Let us say you're already an 80% scorer in your school exams and you set a goal for yourself, in the next paper I'm going to score at least 75%. Now when you're already an 80% scorer, 75% is not at all difficult, right? So objectives need to be set that challenge you in a realistic manner and they take heed of the resources available. Otherwise, you are busy without any possibility of success. So in this case, you must be smart and use the SMART criteria. And we add one more thing to this, the S at the end is supported by the organization. Whatever goals you have as a student must be supported by your family, by your friends, and by the schools that you study in. Now, many people complain that they have too much of work to do and too little time. So overwork can have its own effects, which could be either psychological or physiological. And there are multiple reasons why you feel overworked. Either you do too much of the work, or you have too much of work to do and not enough resources for that. To deal with overwork, try one of these things. Understand your pressure, understand your limits, know your limits. Don't get worked up or panicked if you're not able to deal with it. And more importantly, don't blame everything on yourself. Sometimes it's better to just walk away from this situation which seems impossible. Learn to estimate time as well as possible. Set and agree with priorities, and more importantly, keep those priorities. And always remind yourself, there is only a limited amount of time available to you. Learn to differentiate between urgent tasks and important tasks. When a thing is on fire, it is urgent to put the fire out, but it might not be important, with the meaning that a fire to be put out does not necessarily add to your ultimate goal in life. So urgent tasks seem to assume importance because they demand immediate attention, and important tasks become urgent if they are left undone. So to judge importance versus urgency of a task, just analyze it in this manner. What would be the impact of doing this activity now vis-a-vis what is the effect if I do not do this activity now? So remember, a high importance and high urgency task is your first priority. Then a high importance, low urgency task is your second priority. It's only after this that you talk about activities which are high on urgency but low on importance. The last priority should be given to those activities which are neither urgent nor very important. The main aim of prioritization is to avoid a crisis. So for this, you must schedule your priorities opposed to prioritizing your schedule. If you can learn what activities are important, and important as in helping you achieve your set goals, vis-a-vis what activities are simply urgent but not that important, you will learn how to manage your time. As students, I would very strongly recommend that you set a fixed timetable for you with enough time scheduled in between for relaxing and entertainment as well, and stick to that timetable. Once you have a timetable in a written format in front of your eyes, you will learn how to manage time more effectively. In fact, many devices like smartphones and tabs, which students of this generation seem to have in abundance, have a lot of apps like planners in them. Now remember, you can actually use technology to help prioritize your daily routine and activities. Once you learn how to do this, you will have more time on your hands than what is actually required. This was a basic session on time management. My name is Sathya. Wish you all the best. Have a good day.